The Cerberus is a dog-like monster who can attack with fire breath, dealing heavy damage to its targets. The Harpy is a tough flying opponent who can strike twice with her claws or use a piercing scream to inflict panic on her victims. Panic can either cause the target to be afflicted by illusion or the far more dangerous confusion, making these creatures potentially lethal to our force. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Let's Play Shining Force 3. This is Battle 22 on the Lookover Tower, and just seeing a brief overview here of what we have to face. That is Fiale, the High Priest of Bolzome, and his retinue. A lot of these enemies aren't particularly threatening. As we've seen, certainly last battle, our force is significantly more powerful than it was before. Admittedly, we will run into a few more interesting enemies this particular fight, which is good, don't get me wrong. It's always nice to have a bit of a challenge. What we also have to deal with is the fact that there is a tomb, which you may have seen over there, a ruin. It's Ruin 5. There's one of those every chapter. And what you will see in there are a number of very tasty items that we want to try and get our hands on. We'll be sending in 3 of our force in order to get them. This is quite a large ruin, and there's also a hidden character in there, so we'll be trying to uncover him as well. In the meantime, I've sent Eldar up to take a little bit of punishment. Eldar is doing rather well at the moment, has got to the stage where she is able to fight independently, most of the time anyway. A little bit unfortunate to get beaten on so early by those wyverns, but it shouldn't be a problem. Get Eldar healed back up again, moved over to the right slightly with Grace, because I have a feeling those wyverns are going to come down, and I'm hoping they'll go after Eldar as opposed to going after Grace. Whether or not that's going to happen, I don't know. Well, there you go. Evidently it did. The AI does prioritize the healers when it gets the opportunity to do so. And in fact, the wyvern turning out to be less effective against Grace due to Grace's inherent magic resistance. Now, you may notice in this video that there's been a lot of edits and cuts. I have sliced out the parts of the video that are not interesting to watch, but it shouldn't be too difficult for you to follow. You'll see our force moving up there towards the tomb, attempting to get in there as soon as humanly possible. The thieves start out on the map and move straight towards the tomb and get in a couple of turns before we can. That is by design, and we shouldn't have too much of a problem catching them if we move correctly. We're going to send in our 3 fastest characters. That's Sybil, Dantes, and Pen. In the meantime, we need some payback on these wyverns. And that should do the job. It's the Cross Slash, that's the level 2 special ability for Eldar and a very dead wyvern. You will also hopefully get the opportunity to see some more of our level 3 specials, as well as the specials that we gain from our various mithril weapons. They're always nice to see. I'm going to move back over right a little bit there just to deal with that wyvern, just so we can clear the wyvern out of the way. I don't want the wyvern following us. I'd like to get everyone moved over there and not have to deal with attacks from behind, because there will be a couple of spawns, and indeed you can see one right now. There's a harpy there. Don't want to deal with that. Don't want to be repeatedly attacked from behind. The harpy's more dangerous than the wyverns due to their special ability. The last thing I want to do is be caught by both. Now, Irene is lagging behind. That always happens with one character or another. You do end up with a character who's maybe just not quite as good and doesn't perform. In the case of Irene, the reason we keep Irene around is her heals are very, very good, and she also gains a invaluable spell by the name of Resist. And Resist is a magic resistance AoE spell similar to Support, and it can indeed severely blunt enemy magic users. It's quite a costly spell, can't use it all that often, but it's nice to have nonetheless. Mass Monks still appearing in this mission, and indeed will appear in the next mission as well, although we will see a new variety that is somewhat more dangerous. At the moment they're just cannon fodder. Now this is a new enemy by the name of the Cerberus. Cerberus, they're just a variant of the Hellhound. Their bite doesn't do a massive amount of damage, but they can do a particularly damaging flame breath attack that we do want to avoid. They do it quite a lot. It is quite a common attack. So that's really what distinguishes them from any other cannon fodder mob, as it were. and we will be seeing the more powerful creatures doing a lot more specials as the game goes along to compensate for the fact that our defense is so high. Now there you can see the two thieves. One goes to the left to pick up 3 chests, and the other one goes to the right, at least from this perspective, to pick up the other. Now, we're using power spears here, because if we use our mithril spears, we will end up killing the enemies too quickly. And there are a number of spawns, Bloodborne, which serve to get in the way. Now, of course, the only threat for the Bloodborne at this level is the possibility of a paralysis attack, so what we're hoping for is to clear those Bloodborne out of the way as soon as humanly possible. Now, I don't really see any need to equip the weaker spear here. We can just equip the silver spear and kill the Bloodborne in a single hit. But we're keeping the weaker spears for later on, particularly with the thief on the right, or indeed the left-hand side from that perspective, because we need to get in 3 hits without killing him. The last thing we want to do is kill him in 2 hits and lose the last item as a direct result of that. His Blood Bowl will try and get in our way, but this is not a particularly restrictive tomb, so having them block our way doesn't really threaten the ability for us to grab the items in any way, shape, or form. And a couple of lizard men there, deliberately put in there, of course, because they knew that we would bring knights. Deliberate piece of game design there. Of course, you're going to send in your fastest characters, so let's put in some axe wielders. That becomes more common in the other scenarios as well. They can quite easily predict who you're going to send in. However, lizard men don't really have all that much of a chance against Eldar. Eldar, who is able to get an increased critical strike against those axe users, as well as an increased counter, which we will get to see later on. In the meantime, it really is just a case of clearing everyone out in order to reach Fiale. Now, Fiale will continue to move up the tower, which is not something that I've shown simply because it's a waste of time to see. We'll stop close to the top and not go any further until we trigger a scripted event. Now, we don't really have to worry too much about Fiale at all as regards to, say, saving a character or whatever. It is scripted, so we can just take our time. Clear the Cerberus out of the way, and as it's a new mob, it's always nice to get that 49 XP, almost half a level. It's kind of a shame to see Khan lagging behind a little bit, but you've got to bear in mind that the weapons that Khan can use are not that great on the grand scheme of things. They are deliberately designed to not be as powerful as lances and swords and other such weapons. What we do have, however, is Khan, who has very good counter and extremely high defense. He's very tough, difficult to take out. Now, there you can see, we've got 2 chests there, and that's 1 exit over there, the little hole on the left. And there's 3 chests in total on the right-hand side, and there is the exit. We want to stop the thieves getting there. Now, we can hit this thief once now with our weaker spear, just to ensure that he drops the first item. We don't really care about the first item, but he will drop the items in the order that he acquired them. So we have to get that item off him in order to get the good stuff. We'll take it, but the chances are we're going to have to throw it away later. Not really a big deal. Let's clear the barrel out of the way, just in case. I believe this barrel does contain an item. Nothing fancy, I would imagine. 56 damage, a healing drop, and indeed level 1 in spears. It's not preferable. We didn't really want that. Critical strike's not something we want to risk doing against these thieves. Thankfully, Dantes is going against the thief, which is only going to pick up 2 items, as opposed to 3. So we can afford a critical strike. And there you go, there's the special attack I've been looking for a while. It's level 3 pen, and a massive amount of curse damage from that. That's the Pen Dynamo. Extremely dangerous. Don't ask me why he sets his head on fire. I can't answer that question for you. Looks like our Bloodborne won't be bothering Dantes anymore. Now, the Hydra, I imagine we can avoid. It's only got a movement speed of 4. We can outstrip that quite easily. So, avoiding the Hydra, not a difficult task. Now, we're going to try Soulsteel again here. Soulsteel with Masquerin, while it sounds like a great idea, it really isn't. Masquerin does not have inherently good dark magic capabilities. So, the chances of her actually doing a lot of damage with that, pretty low. Now, as to whether or not Soul Steel is affected by luck, that is a item of debate amongst the Shining Force playing community. Yes, apparently there is one of those. It's a tricky one. We don't really know whether or not luck directly affects the ability to cast Soul Steel and instantly kill the target. We do know that it affects the possibility of dying to Soul Steel or other insta-kill attacks. Hence, any monster with luck 9 or above is in fact immune to such things, and I believe that also applies to our allies. But yeah, it's something we just don't know. There's a lot of things in the game that are like that. They're just not documented. Anyway, now that we've speculated quite enough, and get this Harpy out of the way, and we saw a nice counterattack there by Grace, and of course the reason for that is that the Harpy is classed as an evil creature, the Ankh is strong against evil, and thereby, in a similar way to what we've just seen, with the Axe being weak against the Wing, you get an increased chance to counterattack. Right, now that's all of the items that the Thief on the left will grab. The Thief on the right we're going to have to keep pursuing. The one on the left is something of a decoy. He loots chests which have nothing particularly special in them whatsoever. You don't even have to really worry about taking his items because they're not great. Hey, a piece of mithril. Way, like we don't have enough of that already. Regardless, though, being the completionists that we are, we'll take what he has. Small mithrils are always nice. We can always use more accessories. Small mithrils are way, way rarer than large mithrils in this game. Now, as much as I'd like to take the rest of what he had, evidently the RNG will not allow us to do that at this time. Now, I think we can definitely stick around here for a little bit longer. Eldar is becoming extremely effective against enemies like this, which is great, because you can send Eldar off to a far end of the battlefield just to tie up a few of the enemies. Any of the rare battles that do have a strong vertical element like this one, Eldar does very well in, for obvious reasons. Now, I would like to get around here and hopefully dispatch this Harpy pretty quickly before she gets the chance to attack back. Sadly, it is not to be. There's the Spark 2 spell. You'll have noticed that Kite does gain a large number of pretty cool spells, very powerful. Unfortunately, what he doesn't gain is a lot of mana to use them. Kind of a one-shot deal. Now, the main weakness of the Ankh-using Mask Monks is the fact that their only healing spell is Aura. So while used on a single target, Aura is a high mana drain and incredibly ineffective. Great against large groups, but not so awesome otherwise. That's what I feared would happen with Eldar. That's the one thing that can really put Eldar on borrowed time, the poison attack. Now, that defense is not going to help against poison at all, so we're going to be rapidly losing HP as the turns go on. And there's the second counter-attack. Lizardman cleared out quite nicely. Any axe-wielding opponents can expect that kind of reaction from a wing user, a sword user, particularly the wing user, because the wing gives increased counter to begin with. Alright, so now let's clear this guy out of the way, and we're just going to have to be patient with the Thief on the right.
Prepare to die.
And there's that special attack, nothing particularly fancy. It is pretty rare to see the special attacks with the spear because, hey, you don't use it very often, so skilling it up requires some actual active effort on your part. And let's face it, it's not really worth the hassle. I will try and get a couple more levels in spear so you can see some. I believe some of the latest specials are quite nifty. And there goes the Thief. It is rather sad to see that Penn is falling behind in terms of hit points, defense, and attack, but it is particularly predictable. He can't upgrade his weapons, so he's extremely limited to what he can do. But we'll keep him around nonetheless. And there we go, that's the special with the wing that we acquired for Eldar. The Helldive, massive amounts of damage. And if the enemy manages to stay alive, I believe it causes paralysis. Now, as you can see, Obright's defense has really gone through the roof lately. Obright does have very high natural defense, and it is predictable for Obright to get that strong and be someone who can really soak up the damage. It's nice to see him finally come into his own. Now, that secret character I was mentioning, hidden inside this pillar. Or is it? No, he is actually the pillar. Great disguise. And that literally is his backstory right there. There is nothing else. He's on the run from some ninjas. We're not said ninjas. And therefore he joins us. He's a cool character. He's got fast movement speed, high agility. He can do a reasonable amount of damage. He can use a shuriken ranged weapon as well as his sword. And he also has a number of useful special attacks and magic abilities. It's a good all-round character. His only weakness is his inherently low defense. But he does have a high chance of evade. Still capable of some hefty damage, Pennies, but you gotta bear in mind that Pen is being heavily propped up by the fact he's using a plus 15 attack ring, the Ibaru, or Evil Ring, as it's called. And his defense, he can still take the big damage from creatures like that. It is very worrying. I think what we're gonna have to do in order to keep Pen competitive is really build those friendships. He's doing pretty well so far with various friendships, so we'll see what we can do there. Now, I don't want to waste too much mana because there's a large group of enemies up ahead, and that will be very good for throwing a few Spark 2s. And Spark 2 is very expensive. In terms of mana, that is. Same deal with Noon, to be honest. If we get Noon up there and we're going to be throwing around the Spark 2s, we don't want to drain our mana too much before we get up. There are a lot of fights that we will see at this stage in the game which end up being endurance battles, whereby you have to conserve your mana. We were able to throw it around with, dare I say, gay abandon earlier, but that's going to cease to be the case from this point onwards. I'd like Eldar to be relatively self-sufficient, so I'm going to move Eldar back there, and then I'll be able to cast a heal with one of the healers, probably Khan. Yes, indeed, Khan. Drop a heal on Eldar, and then Eldar can get right back into the fight without having to worry too much. Once we engage the boss, it is likely that those enemies over there will also move to engage us, so having Eldar eliminate those enemies first is beneficial. It really is just formalities at this point. But there is the special ability, the rank 3 special ability for Hayward. As well as causing rather pretty effects and a slightly buggy disappear animation, it drains massive amounts of hit points. So if you take a lot of hits and you get one of they, well, hey, there you go. Right, that is the Wendigo Wand. That is the endgame wand, in this case for Noon. Of course, any of the magic users could use it. It summons Wendigo. The Wendigo summon spell, and it is a rank A weapon. There is no other there's no other one that you want to take, to be honest, at least in Scenario 1, and indeed, arguably through Scenario 3. Wendigo is a great summon spell. And of course, since it's an ice summon, and Noon has affinity with ice magic, he's the best guy to give it to. See, there was a method in the madness behind who exactly you choose to take which weapon. Generally speaking, whatever weapon you start with by default is probably the best weapon for that class, and that is especially true in terms of casters. The weapons that become available just happen to match up quite nicely. Now, we don't want to let him get away. We want to grab that last piece of loot, and that will end the tomb. With a full amount of success, of course. That's a critical hit that we have there, because Sybil hasn't learned anything with the spear, but it's enough. And there is the Wendigo Wand, and we'll have to throw something away for this. And to be honest, it's got to be the Goddess tier, because everything else is worth way more. And that, as they say, is that for Tomb 5. Right. Now, this is a new spell. It goes by the name of Resist, and it does what it says on the tin. It increases magic resistance. To be honest, if there is one spell in the entire game that ends up imbalancing it in your favour, it's this one. It doesn't last too long, so you have to frequently recast it, and it also takes quite a bit of mana to do. But I just dislike the fact that it's in the game at all. I'll demonstrate it on this point, but to be honest, I'm going to avoid using it in future. You don't need it. You really don't, and it's nice to make the game just that little bit more challenging. Now, here's a little technique that I like to use. If you want to swap items in battle, the best way to do it is, instead of waiting, say, for Sybil to get her turn and waste it giving an item, you can effectively swap the item over. Now, here's the scripted event I was talking about. This is Duke Palsis, one of the closest confidants of Lord Conrad, currently watching over the Lookover Tower. Knowledgeable guy, knows a lot about the backstory of the game, and we will find out an awful lot about that after this video. You'll find it in the thread. Some very cool backstory and exposition going on there. He will also serve as our bank character and advisor over the next few battles, indeed possibly till the entire end of the game, I believe. Anti-intellectualism rife in this game as well. What a terrible world we live in. Now, we want to get rid of this harpy as soon as possible. And the Mirage Dance Level 3 special won't do it. A little bit of overkill. Nothing wrong with that. Now, these masked monks will continue to spawn throughout the fight, and they will move at full speed towards the Force. Are we bothered? No. Now, what we are concerned about, of course, is the panic attack. Explaining the bestiary, that inflicts confusion or illusion. In this case, confusion is the worst debuff. And just to add insult to injury, here comes the Spark 2.
You disgust.
He's got that really nice combo of abilities, and he's going to make us pay. Now, notice the difference in damage between Khan and Kite. Kite had the resist spell on, Khan didn't. Massive amount of magic resist that can be given by that particular debuff, which, to be honest, in my opinion, just screws up the balance of the game. As such, that will be the first and last time I use it, until we get on some really hard content in, say, Scenario 3 or the Premium disc, whereby you need to use stuff like that. We don't need it right now. Now, Fiale, like all the other Bullsome High Priests, has a magic barrier. Now, this barrier can be broken via the use of the Elbism Orb. I'm not going to, because it's pointless. Those of you who watched the live video several weeks ago will be aware that we managed to kill Fiale in, say, 3 to 4 hits. Admittedly, a lot of that was down to sheer lucky positioning, but to be honest, that's just silly. Now, with the magic barrier up, the amount of damage we can do to Fiale is severely reduced. So even throwing these Spark 2s is not going to do an awful lot. What it will do, however, is clean out the additional mobs and defense that Fiale has. Let's get them out of the way. And that is rank 3 in the Rod's weapon. Always nice. Now, this is how not to use a summon spell. I'm just going to demonstrate to you how ineffective the summon spell can be when used on multiple targets. I explained it before how the summon spell works. As I say, it's more effective against single targets. It's an assassination spell, particularly good against bosses. But at the moment, it's doing less damage than a Spark 1 would, and for twice the cost. Bear in mind, this is rank 2 as well. Rank 1 does even less. Quite nice to look at. Admittedly, I don't really like the fact that they appear to be standing on a river of mustard, but the effects are improved later. Now, here is the Wendigo summon spell.
Vanish.
And we'll, of course, get to use this later with Noon. Now, this is actually hitting 2 targets, which makes it relatively effective. Now, Kite has that magic resistance, but it's still able to do 13 points of damage. Now imagine what would have happened without the resist. That could have potentially been a kill. Now, this next spark should clean out the last of the defense, and really, at that point, it becomes a matter of formalities. Just eliminating Fiale in the quickest possible way. And hopefully the coolest possible way. More entertaining. And that is that. Both of them down. And what a better way than to just punch him in the face. I'm looking forward to when we get the special level 3 with Khan. It's very fun to watch. Sadly, no specials left from Kite, but still a reasonably good hit. And resist has now worn off. So what we need to do is either heal Kite or eliminate Fiale at this point. Eliminating Fiale should not be all that tricky. There's a plus damage there for 15 health. Down to 25. And another cast right there of what looks like Wendigo.
Vanish.
Will do quite a bit of damage, but it is split, I believe, between 3 targets. Nothing to really worry about too much. And of course, as you saw there, we did heal Kite back up to full health. Not really worth showing. It elongates the fight. Well, there's no point in using a soul still on a boss, so we might as well just throw a blaze in there and be done with it. Masquerade on very low mana anyway. That's 14 health. Couple of extra hits should do it. Now, I've skipped forward just a little bit there just to finish it off. We are done, folks. Ah, but he just has to be awkward, doesn't he? No surviving that. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been watching Battle 22 on the Lookover Tower. So let's play Shining Force 3 Scenario 1. I will be back for the next battle, hopefully relatively shortly. Check out the thread on somethingawful.com, and if you like this, I would suggest you subscribe on YouTube. Good night.